magnetic field and you have an electric field, and that's creating a resonant frequency, then all three of them are working together at the same time, which means you should be able to take a sound and you should be able to turn that sound into electricity, or you should be able to turn that sound into a magnetic field. Because a magnetic field can be turned into electricity and electricity can be turned into a magnet, if sound is a part of that equation, then you should be able to do the same thing with sound. So I was looking into sound technology and I found an interesting experiment online where they took a tube and they took a light bulb wire and they put the light bulb wire into the glass tube. And when they did that, once the wire got about 1/3 of the way into the double open-ended tube, the tube actually started humming. We know that electricity going through a wire produces heat. We know that heat, when it's being produced, wants to move away from hot area into the cold areas. So when you put that hot wire into the glass tube, we know that the reason that that tube starts humming is because it starts pulling a whole bunch of air through the tube, because the heat that's in there wants to get out of there. So the heat rises up out of the glass tube, which creates a pressure inside of the tube, which pulls cooler air into the tube so that the hot air in the tube can get out of the tube. So that's why the tube starts humming. But you can actually have the same effect on a close-ended tube. So if you close one end off, now instead of putting the hot wire 1/3 of the way into the tube, you actually have to put the hot wire almost all the way in through the tube. So you got to put it in about 2/3 of the way into the tube. But then you end up having the same effect where you put the hot wire at the very far end of the closed end of the tube, and then the heat pushes itself out the open end of the tube and it draws air into the closed end of the tube. And instead of heating the tube by sticking a wire 2/3 of the way up the tube, now what they're doing is they are putting the tube over a hot fire. The candle, like a tea light candle, is producing heat on the far end, like where the closed end of the tube is. It's producing heat, and they have a rubber on the open end of the tube. So because the heat is growing into the tube, the cold air wants to come into the tube and the heat wants to get out of the tube. So what ends up happening is the rubber that's on the tube starts vibrating. You can basically connect a magnet to it, and when you connect the magnet to it, now you have a moving magnet. Now if you add coiled wires to the moving magnet, you end up having a source that can produce electricity. So now you're basically turning sound waves and sound vibrations, you're basically turning them into electrical energy. So all you're having to do is add a little bit of heat and you're producing electrical energy. So I find it very interesting that you can basically take a tube and you can produce a wind current through it, and it will produce a sound, and you can use that sound vibration to create electricity using magnets and using wires. So if we find out that sound is now capable of levitating things, sound is now capable of producing electricity or producing magnetism possibly, that means that the study of sound is basically nowhere near where the study of sound could be. Like, people spend their lives studying sound because they want to be a musician or a singer. So they're studying sound and sound frequencies for the purpose of just being musicians. But apparently science has a much broader basis that we can be using sound for, and we can be studying sound more intently than what we currently are studying sound, because there could be a lot more uses for sound in this world than what we currently know of. Kind of funny that, you know, most people, when you talk to them, they don't think sound is very important. They don't take sound into a huge consideration when you're talking about anything scientific in this world. But I find it very funny that the US military and militaries across the world have been doing doing studies in sound. So they've basically been taking sound projection and they've been turning sound projection into weapons. So if you ever watch the movie The Hulk, in that movie, the Hulk is running across a field and they drive a Hummer across the field and they have a big speaker on the top of the Hummer, and they got two different Hummers that drive in together and they turn their speakers on pointed at the Hulk. And in that part of the video you could see like the sound waves rippling his skin as he tries to fight against the sound waves to get towards the military personnel that are trying to capture him or kill him. The movies tell you that the government has been doing these kind of studies, yet because it's in the movie, people think that it's not real. People think that it's not possible. People think that it's a myth, but it's not a myth. The private sector hasn't really been doing much studies in sound. People haven't really been investing a lot of money in sound studies, even with the study of cymatics, where they're starting to levitate light objects using sound. There's been no huge amounts of money being put into it, being put into the study. And we have myths from all around the world, from ancient Buddhists, ancient shamans, all talking about how sound was used in the past way more often than what we use it today. It was used for good things and for bad things in the past. There was a story about these Buddhist monks, and they used to bring out their horns apparently, and they got these big long horns and they would sit there and blow on the horns, and they would keep blowing on the horns, and eventually using the horns in a certain way they were able to levitate heavy stones just by using these horns. If cymatics is levitating things using speakers and in the sound waves, it's able to actually hold something tangible. Maybe the myths were true. Maybe Buddhist monks have been able to use horns to levitate large objects. What the study of cymatics is proving about there being all sorts of different benefits and maybe some negative things with each frequency. If you hit a certain resonant frequency that stone has, maybe it does become weightless. Or maybe if you hit a certain resonant frequency, like look at crystal glass. People have been shattering wine glasses without touching it using resonant frequency for centuries. Like it's nothing new, you know? Like you take a crystal wine glass and you rub your finger around it and you can get it to sing music and you can get it to hum. We've all known about these frequencies for a long time, but we don't seem to take it as seriously as what we maybe should take it. Maybe there should be a lot more investments in the private sector when it comes to sound technology, because I know that governments have spent billions of dollars studying it, so it just kind of makes me wonder how far that they've been able to go with it. If sound is in a triune with electricity and magnetism, then that means you should be able to use sound technology to create electricity, which means if you can use sound technology to create electricity, means we don't need to be burning coal, we don't need to be burning oil and gas. We can literally just set up a sound frequency machine underneath the hood of a vehicle, and it will constantly run and charge the batteries in the vehicle, and you can maybe have an electric car that never needs to be plugged in. It just constantly produces its own energy, maybe forever. I don't know. Until we put the money into the studies, because if you look up motors and you look up generators, they are all set up basically the same way. Motors and generators, there's not a huge difference. It's just the slight way that they're laid out. You can literally take a motor and you can turn it into an electric generator. People are doing it all over the world. So the only difference is whether you plug it in and the electricity comes in and drives a motor, or you drive the motor and it produces electricity. Like, it goes both ways. every electronic around the world can basically be turned into a source of electricity that produces electricity, right? You just need to find a way to produce the motion into it to get the electricity out of it. And if sound can move things, then why can't sound drive an alternator, right? Why can't sound drive a generator? If we can do that, then that's free energy for everyone all the time. I mean, you don't need to rely on whether a windmill is turning or whether the sun is out. This thing would just be producing electricity like all the time. So it's just my thoughts, and it's just there's a lot of commonalities between of the things that I've been talking about. Just makes me wonder. It makes it a very interesting topic, and it's a topic that I'm going to spend more time looking into, and it's a topic that I wanted to quickly talk about because I do find it so interesting and fascinating. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this talk. Bye.